The airlock doors hissed open, and a figure in shackles stumbled into the dimly lit cargo hold of the prison transport ship. Grimy, unshaven, and sporting a black eye, Jake Harris looked every bit the dangerous criminal the galaxy believed him to be. "Get moving, scum," snarled the guard, shoving Jake forward with the butt of his plasma rifle. Jake bit back a retort, knowing it would only earn him another beating. He shuffled towards the other prisoners huddled in the hold, a motley assortment of the galaxy's most wanted. As he walked, the chains binding his wrists and ankles clinked with each step, a constant reminder of his captivity. 2 weeks ago, Jake had been the most notorious outlaw in the Andromeda sector, a master hacker and thief with a knack for infiltrating the most secure facilities. That is, until he'd run afoul of the Black Nebula Syndicate. Caught trying to steal their secrets, Jake had been overpowered and handed over to the Interstellar Corrections Authority. Now he was bound for the infamous prison moon of Kilo 6, where he'd spend the rest of his life slaving away in the hellish Trixenia mines. Jake doubted he'd last a month, but he'd be damned if he'd give his captors the satisfaction of going quietly. As the ship shuddered into hyperdrive, Jake took stock of his fellow prisoners, mind working furiously. Some were meek and broken, but others had the look of hardened killers. Jake knew he'd need allies to survive on Kilo 6. His gaze fell on a mountain of a creature, a Zorlak with scales the color of rusted iron and arms thick as tree trunks. The brute caught him looking and bared a mouth full of dagger-like teeth in warning. "I'm gonna enjoy making you my bitch, little human," the Zorlak rumbled. The other prisoners snickered. Jake didn't respond, instead taking a seat against the cold metal wall of the hold. He needed to bide his time and choose his moment carefully. Over the next few hours, Jake observed the guards' routines and the ship's layout as best he could. The Corrections Authority was notoriously brutal, but they were also overconfident. They believed their prisoners to be well and truly cowed. That would be their undoing. As the ship cycled into its night cycle and the lights dimmed, Jake made his move. He twisted his cybernetic hand, the one he'd kept carefully concealed, and the manacle cracked open with a soft click. Slowly, stealthily, he crept towards the Zorlak. The hulking alien was dozing, its rumbling snores echoing through the hold. Quick as a flash, Jake looped his chain around the creature's neck and pulled tight. The Zorlak's eyes snapped open, but before it could roar, Jake hissed in its ear. "Quiet or we're both dead. Nod if you want to get out of here." The Zorlak stilled, then slowly nodded. Jake grinned fiercely. "Good. Now help me with these chains. We're going to raise a little hell." Together, Jake and the Zorlak made their way around the hold, quietly freeing the other prisoners. Some required convincing, but the prospect of freedom was too tempting to resist. Soon they had a small army ready and waiting. Jake held up a hand for attention. "Get ready," he whispered. "When those doors open, all hell breaks loose. It's us or them, for freedom." The prisoners tensed, eyes glinting in the dim light. Jake turned towards the door, heart pounding, muscles coiled. This was it. Time to see if fate was on his side. With a deep boom, the airlock doors unsealed, and the guards stepped through, shock batons at the ready. Jake smiled grimly. "Now!" he roared, and the prisoners surged forward as one, screaming battle cries. The guards barely had time to raise their weapons before the wave of bodies crashed into them. And just like that, the battle for the prison ship began. The cargo hold exploded into chaos. Prisoners grappled with guards, fighting hand-to-hand in a brutal melee. Shock batons crackled and arced, and the air filled with grunts of pain and furious roars. At the heart of the maelstrom, Jake fought like a man possessed. He snatched a baton from a fallen guard and laid about himself with the crackling weapon, dropping attackers left and right. The Zorlak fought at his side, crushing armor and bone with its massive fists. "Push forward," Jake bellowed over the din. "To the bridge!" Slowly, inexorably, the tide of battle turned. The guards, caught off guard and outnumbered, fell back under the onslaught. The prisoners surged into the corridors of the ship, fighting for every inch. Alarms blared and emergency lights flashed, painting the scene in hellish blues and reds. Jake led the charge, a snarl fixed on his bloody face. His whole life had been leading up to this moment. This chance to strike back at the system that had branded him a criminal and condemned him to a slow death. He would not fail. They reached the final barricade before the bridge, a hastily erected wall of crates and debris manned by a dozen guards. Blaster fire zipped past Jake's head as he ducked into cover. "We need to break through," he shouted to the Zorlak. "Cover me! I'm going to flank them!" The Zorlak grunted in acknowledgement, then let out a tremendous roar and charged the barricade like a rampaging beast. Blaster shots sparked off its thick hide as it barreled into the guards, scattering them like ninepins. Jake took advantage of the distraction to dart along the corridor wall and come up on the guard's flank. He fell on them in a whirlwind of strikes, his shock batting a blur. Guards crumpled under the onslaught, and then suddenly, the way to the bridge was clear. Jake and the prisoners burst onto the command deck, weapons at the ready. The bridge crew whirled to face them, eyes wide with shock and terror. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Jake barked, brandishing his shock baton. "Resist and you die!" The captain, a grizzled Arcturian, stepped forward, hand on his sidearm. "You'll never get away with this, scum," he snarled. "The Corrections Authority will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy." Jake laughed harshly. "They can try. I'll take my chances with freedom. Now get your pilot to change course, unless you want your crew's deaths on your conscience." The captain glared daggers at Jake, but with the other prisoners training stolen blasters on him, he had little choice. He nodded curtly to the Allori pilot, who stammered out a course change. As the ship veered off its route to Kilo 6, Jake felt a rush of elation. They had done it. Against all odds, they had seized control of their fates. But he knew this was only the beginning. "Set course for the Lomar Drift," he ordered the pilot. "We need to ditch this ship and scatter before the Authority catches up." Hours later, hidden among the scrapyard asteroid field of the Lomar Drift, Jake prepared to part ways with his fellow escaped prisoners. The Zorlak approached him, its massive form dwarfing Jake's. "You fought well for a human," it rumbled. "What will you do now?" Jake shrugged, a cocky grin playing on his lips. "What I always do, stay one step ahead of the law. Find new scores, new thrills. They'll never hold Jake Harris for long." The Zorlak shook its head. "You're either very brave or very foolish, human. But I owe you my freedom. Should you ever need my strength, I am in your debt." Jake clasped the alien's massive forearm, respect in his eyes. "I'll hold you to that, big guy, until our paths cross again." With that, Jake slipped away into the maze of derelict ships and asteroids, ready to disappear into the lawless fringes of the galaxy. The Corrections Authority would be hunting him now, but Jake was used to being hunted. As he made his way deeper into the drift, a fierce joy burned in his chest. The galaxy had tried to break him, but Jake Harris was far from broken. And now the greatest adventure of his life was about to begin.